She had one small satisfaction. Dragon, who had been admitted after she was safely caged, had eaten his bowl of cat food greedily, sleeping powder and all, purring as he licked the last scraps from the bottom. Billy was looking at the cage. There, he cried. It walked. I saw it. I told you it was all right. He started up from his chair. Billy, stay in your place and eat your stew, said Mrs. Fitzgibbon. The mouse can wait. Speaking of mice, said Mr. Fitzgibbon, who has driven to town that afternoon? There was quite a stir today at Henderson's hardware store. About mice? No, but nearly. About rats. I went in to order the new lunch tin, and there was quite a group there, talking about an odd thing that had happened. It seems that 6 or 7 rats got themselves electrocuted there a few days ago. Very strange. Henderson sells motors. He has a whole shelf of them. The rats, for some reason, had got on the shelf. He says it looked as if they were fooling with one of the motors, trying to move it. That's a new one, said Paul. Rats stealing motors. They weren't really, of course. Anyway, it happened during the night. When Henderson, came into the shop in the morning, he tried to turn on the lights, and the fuse was blown. He found the rats all grouped around the motor. It had been left unplugged in, though it was turned off. They must have been gnawing at the insulation for some reason. At least that's what he thinks. They caused a short circuit, and all bunched together like that, the current went through them and killed a lot. Pretty good kind of rat trap, I'd say, Mrs. Fitzgibbon remarked. Mrs. Frisby was now listening to the conversation very closely. Dragon had stretched out on the floor, looking drowsy. Wait, said Mr. Fitzgibbon, that's only the beginning. It seems that the local weekly was hard up for news. They heard about it and sent their reporter over. Fred Smith, said Mrs. Fitzgibbon. Yes, Fred, who wrote a little article about it with a headline, Mechanized Rats Invade Hardware Store. Something like that. Well, it attracted more attention than he expected. The next thing they knew, believe it or not, the federal government got into it. They sent a squad over there from the Public Health Service with a truckload of equipment, just on account of 7 rats, said Billy. They should send the truck over to here. We've got more than that. That's just what I said, Mr. Fitzgibbon went on. And do you know, they're going to? I was joking, of course, but the man in charge of the group didn't take it as a joke at all. He wanted to know where the farm was, how far away, how many acres, what I raised, how many rats I thought there were. He acted really interested. It seems they wanted to examine the dead rats at Henderson's, but they couldn't. He'd already sent them to the town dump, and they were incinerated. I never heard of such a thing, said Mrs. Fitzgibbon. All that fuss over a few dead rats. I have, said Paul, and I bet I know what they're after. What? They think the rats have rabies. They don't like to say so because it makes people panicky. What's rabies? Asked Billy. A disease, said Mr. Fitzgibbon. A very bad one, spread by animals. You know, Paul, I think you're probably right. That would explain why the Public Health Service is in it. Epidemic control. Anyway, they're planning to check on the rats all over this area. Don't you remember, Paul said, a few years ago when everybody had to lock up their dogs? And some people were shooting every dog they saw. That's why they keep it quiet until they're sure. And another thing, they taught us on the vet course in school that when an animal starts acting strange, it may be a sign of rabies. Well, chewing electric wires, that's strange enough. And they think some rats might be infected. Mrs. Fitzgibbon sounded worried. I suppose they must, said Mr. Fitzgibbon, though they never mentioned rabies at all. When are they coming? Day after tomorrow, Saturday morning. The man in charge, a doctor, somebody, said they had some more checking to do in town tomorrow. They're coming with an extermination truck. cyanide gas, I think. I can tell you where to look, Paul said. Me too, said Billy. Under the rose bush. That's right, said Mr. Fitzgibbon. In fact, they'll probably want to bulldoze that bush out of here. I can do that with the big tractor. Bulldoze my rose bush, said Mrs. Fitzgibbon indignantly. They will not. Look at it this way, her husband said. I've got to get rid of those rats anyway. I'd already decided to. They're stealing too much feed. Seeds, too, more all the time. If I paid an exterminator to do it, he'd charge a couple $100. If the government will do it free, why shouldn't we let them? Well, said Mr. Fitzgibbon, still not soothed, Mrs. Fitzgibbon, then you can spend the money to buy me some new rose bushes. That's just what I had in mind, said Mr. Fitzgibbon, with a smile, and maybe some lilacs, too. Mrs. Fitzgibbon had always wanted a lilac bush. They were her favorite shrub. Mrs. Frisby did not believe at all that it was rabies the men were looking for. She wished Mr. Fitzgibbon had been able to remember the name of the doctor, somebody. And now she had another urgent reason to get out of the cage. Somehow she had to warn Nicodemus. Dragon slept on the kitchen floor. Escape. At 10, by the kitchen clock, the Fitzgibbons went to bed. Dragon was put out, the doors locked, and the lights turned off. The first of these things were done by Billy, on instruction from his mother. Not without some difficulty. He opened the door. Come on, Dragon, out. He won't get up. I never saw such a lazy cat. He gets worse every day. Finally, Dragon, protesting with only the sleepiest of whines, was picked up and deposited on the back porch. He scarcely opened his eyes. By that time, it was dark. Mrs. Frisby waited a few minutes until she was sure they were really gone, and until her cage adjusted so she could see the bars of her cage. They were vertical bars, smooth and no thicker than matchsticks, which made them slippery to climb. But by turning more or less sideways, she was able to grip them fairly well. She inched her way up to the sliding door and tried to lift it. She could tell from the first pull that it was no use. The door was stiff and it was heavy, and she could not get a good enough grip on either it or the cage wall to exert much pressure. Still she kept trying, first lifting on the middle of the door, then on one corner, then another. Straining every muscle, in half an hour she admitted defeat, at least for the moment, and climbed back down to the bottom of the cage. She sat there shaking from the effort and thought somehow she had to get out. Her children, even now, would be alone in the dark house, alone at night for the first time. Martin and Teresa would be trying to reassure the younger ones, yet they themselves would be badly frightened. What would they think, since she had not told them about Dragon and the sleeping powder? She hoped that perhaps they would decide she had, for some reason, stayed with the rats. But at 11, which could not be far off, she could not read the kitchen clock in the dark, the rats would arrive to move the house. Or would they, knowing, since Justin must have told them that she had not come out of the kitchen? She thought they would. She hoped they would, and that Justin would go with them and talk to the children and try to calm their fear. There was something about Justin, a kind of easy confidence that would help them. She no longer had any doubt, of course, that the rats could move her house. It was a generous thing to do, especially at a time when they were hurrying so in their plan, their own move. And they had no idea yet how little time they really had of the new danger that crowded upon them. If she could only get out, she would run and warn them, and it might still not be too late. She thought, it's a good plan, and a brave one. It would be the first time in all the world that intelligent beings, besides men, had ever tried to start a real civilization on their own. They ought to have a chance. It was not right that they should be killed at the last minute or captured. Could it be that they, the men who were coming, were somehow connected with Nimh? Or was it more likely, as Paul had guessed, that they were only worried about rabies? She decided it didn't really matter. The result would be the same. The day after next, the truck would come with its poison gas, and that would be the end of all their plans, unless they could be warned. Wearily, she got up to climb the wall and tried the door again. She heard a noise. It was in the kitchen near her cage, a small scuffling on the hard linoleum floor. Now what kind of a bird can that be with no wings? It was Justin's voice, very soft, and he was laughing. Justin?